So we're going, huh?
That's what they say.
We don't really.
I'm not sure
Jason's
we're gone.
like, I'll
I'm not
believe
sure
it
we've
when
gone
it
very
really
far.
happens.
Yeah.
No, so in fact, the cameras are rolling and the audio. Now, Trev, do you want to check, make sure that are we sending everything where everything's supposed to be going? We're turned on and all that. So we had a little rough start to the day. We're a little behind schedule. However, Jason Skaer,
Yes,
thanks
sir.
for making time, coming down the studio. Thanks for getting here. Not only did you get here on time, but you got here early.
Hey, I'm a coach's kid. If you're 15 minutes early, then you're late.
Then you're late,
Yeah.
right? So, all right. So I didn't even. So we're digging back now. I found out about the basketball
Yeah.
in your history, but you're a coach's kid, so there's sports runs in your family.
Grew up in the gym. My father's been a basketball coach and a teacher for 40 years now. Still teaches, still in education.
Yeah.
So
And you
it's in my blood.
grew up here in Houston. You said
Grew up in Houston, mostly south of Houston. Yeah.
South. And the reason why, I wanted to get you to. I mean, I actually went looking for somebody, and you fit the profile. And so we don't know each other. A lot of times when somebody comes on the show, we already know each other from something, right? And we're talking about, but we don't know each other at all. And right now you don't have a very good impression of me because we started a half hour late.
We got time.
But so I want to give a little backstory as to why I went looking for somebody like you. But first, you got kind of a little interesting history because when I discovered you recently, you're working for a nonprofit. We'll get into that. But you started out in basketball.
Yes.
Right. So that's kind of a fun story. You tell that story.
Sure. Yeah. Like I said, grew up in a coach's home, so playing basketball was my dream for as long as I could remember, honestly. And was lucky enough to play at Oklahoma State.
Lucky enough to be a tall kid, for one thing.
Well, yeah, you had to have a few things.
Yeah.
So played at Oklahoma State, went to the Final Four in 1995.
Yeah.
A long time ago. So March Madness and all that.
You're a very tall 12-year-old.
Exactly. And then ended up playing at Rice University and graduated from there in 1999.
Yeah.
And then played professionally for a handful of years, mostly in Europe. So bounced around the world a little bit. China, Italy, France. Spent most of my time in Austria.
Yeah.
And then played in some of the minor leagues here in the States. Never quite good enough to make it to the NBA.
Yeah. Or you just didn't have the right friends.
Yeah, something like that.
So this is interesting, though, this playing in Europe, because it's kind of a recent, not a recent phenomenon, but I remember there was a time when basketball was it really only happened here. Right,
yes.
Like when we were kids. I think I'm a little older than you, but and I remember when they
look a lot older.
I look a lot older. I am a lot older. And so, remember when they first let professional NBA players,
the Dream Team,
for what's that thing called? The Olympics. Yeah. And we just completely kicked ass. Because nobody had a basketball team that was anywhere near the get the TV on. Nobody had a basketball team. Nobody played it was.
Yeah.
It was ridiculously unfair.
Yeah.
And then somewhere along the line, when I wasn't paying attention, all of a sudden they started playing basketball in other parts of the world, and even a lot of professional players from the U.S. We started importing a lot of players from over there, and then we started guys started going over there to play because they liked it better or whatever. So when did all that happen?
I think about somewhere in the 90s range. The Dream Team definitely exploded it all. I think
that was in the 80s, right?
Yeah, and then and I think people became aware of the game on a global scale. And the Dream Team really inspired, I think, a lot of kids in Europe specifically to want to play basketball. And so ever since then, I mean, you look at the NBA now, some of the best players in the league are from other countries.
From Europe.
And so, when I was coming up.
Seems like a lot came from Eastern European countries.
Yeah, when I was coming up, the European leagues had a little bit of a stigma. They weren't quite as good. They weren't quite as aggressive, all those kinds of things. Right. But it's just not the case anymore. There's really good players in every corner of the world.
Right. So what was your favorite country that you were?
The favorite place I ever played in was Paris.
Yeah.
If I could go back to my 22, 23-year-old self, I'd say stay there.
Stay
As
there.
long as they'll let you stay there.
Yeah.
But I was
You
always
don't want to be there
chasing.
right now. It's a little crazy.
That's all right.
They're kind of rioting because
Yeah,
they don't
all
want to
that stuff.
retire so early.
Small details.
Yeah.
But my dream was always to play in the NBA, and so I left a lot of good opportunities in pursuit of the great opportunity, and just was never quite good enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I could. Yeah. And then you can't go back, right?
Can't go back. Too old now. I'm 47.
Yeah, 47. Can't. I am a lot older than you.
Yeah, I told you.
When was the Dream Team?
That's a good question. I think it's the
what was
90s, but
I thought it was the 80s.
could be wrong.
When was the Olympics? The original Dream Team had Elijah Wan, right?
No. That was Magic,
Oh, it was
and
Larry
Jordan,
Bird.
and Bird,
Larry Bird
and
and
anybody who was
Magic
anybody. Yeah, they were.
Yeah. That was. I want to say that was 92 Olympics.
Look, I was right again. You were wrong.
Not again.
Golly.
You are a basketball player.
Guys are
after
off to a
all.
great start.
The 92 United States men's Olympic basketball team.
That's it.
So
That's
who
where
was?
it all started.
So yeah. Oh, Michael Jordan, right?
Yeah, Magic,
Jordan played.
Jordan, Bird.
Scottie Pippen.
Yeah.
Remember Scottie Pippen?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Chris
back.
Mullin, all
He
those
used to
guys.
play real basketball
Patrick
back
Ewing.
then.
It's the best.
Yeah, Patrick Ewing. Yeah, he played until he was almost your age, I think. He was pretty
not
old.
that old. I don't know.
He played for a long time.
Not quite.
All right, so you played. I think it's good. You played professional ball in Europe,
Oh,
which
it's
is
great.
totally respectable. And we were just saying before we started that professional sports in the U.S. now have gone off in so many directions that it's kind of hard to figure out what they're doing.
Well, both college and pro now are huge businesses, right? There's a lot of money involved, a lot more than there were, 25, 30 years ago. And so, you put that much money in any industry or organization.
We now have the term, it's
all
not
changes.
basketball money, right? Or it's like, have you heard people say this? Like when they start talking about like somebody making a lot of money, somebody making a lot of money, it's like, well, it's not basketball money.
Yeah, no, there's some good contracts out there if you can get them.
Yeah.
And college kids are making a lot of money now, too.
That's right. You can get paid in college.
Yeah, it's
now,
illegal.
Right? Yeah. That's nuts. All right. So we didn't come here to talk about that, although it may come back into play. So you said, we were talking earlier, and you said after all that nonsense of playing basketball, you wanted to do something meaningful with your life.
Yeah.
And so that's not how you said it exactly, but that's how I heard it.
Fair enough.
So you started doing some nonprofit work, right?
Yeah, so bounced around a few different nonprofits.
So I was getting you back for the whole older than me thing. And being late thing. And
That's all right.
all that.
We got time. I'll get you back. I spent most of my career trying to give back to the community, try to make a difference. When you're a professional athlete, you feel like you're special, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of athletes leave that industry trying to figure out, man, what do I do with my life that's going to be able to match that feeling, that sensation, those kinds of things. Right. And there's really not much that can. It's just such a unique thing to do. But what I found pretty quickly was it was a lot of fun giving back and making a difference in other people's lives.
Yeah.
So
and plus Clyde already had the barbecue place, so
that's right.
So that option was off the table.
That was out.
So you had so now, so we don't have to do the whole history because I want to get to the main thing. But now, when I found you, you were you're at the place that you are now, which is, and what is it called again?
So it's the Youth Development Center.
Youth Development
and
Center.
It's on the edge of the 5th Ward here in Houston.
Right.
And
so for those who aren't from here, the wards are the old original parts of town, and now they're, I guess that's what we would call the inner city areas, right?
Yeah, primarily.
Right.
And some of them are really revitalized and cool places to live, and some of them have been left behind a little bit.
Yeah.
So YDC, Youth Development Center, is in one of the places that's kind of left behind.
Right.
We're primarily an after-school program for 120 first through sixth graders.
Okay.
So we'll bring them to our campus every day. We'll feed them a hot meal. For a lot of them, maybe the last hot meal they get that day.
Right.
And then most of them are 2 to 3 years behind academically.
Okay.
And so our whole job and premise is to catch them up and to open up the academic world back up to them.
How do you get how do you
do that?
How do you find these kids? Or
so we've got a great partnership with most of the schools in the area. And then our organization has existed for 26 years now.
Yeah.
So we've got lots of relationships and good reputation in the community. So it's not hard to find the kids and get them signed up.
Right.
The hard job is, all right, now you have them in your building. What do you do with them?
Yeah. So what do you do?
So it started primarily as a literacy program with the idea that if we can get them reading on grade level, then the rest of their academic life opens up for them, right?
Yeah.
But if you can't read, it's hard to do anything else.
Right. Yeah.
And so most of them, again, 2 to 3 years behind in reading. And so we have a technology-based literacy lab, for lack of a better term, that they go through each day. When they get to us at the beginning of the semester, beginning of the school year, they get tested to find their baseline.
Yeah.
Once we find their baseline, the computer program will walk them through at their own pace throughout the school year to catch them up. Now, we've got certified teachers and teachers' assistants in every room to help them. But if they stay with us the whole school year, last year we caught them up almost 2 grade levels in reading. And so we can pretty much catch them up to par. Our youngest kids, usually first and second graders, a lot of them can't read at all when they come to us, and by the time they leave, they're all independent readers.
Are they are they happy to be there? They engage, I mean, I'm sure it varies from kid to kid, but
So the short answer is yes. We built a $6 million state-of-the-art facility in 2019 with the idea of, hey, a lot of the schools are
completely empty in 2020, right?
Yeah, exactly. So last year was actually the first year it was up and running fully.
Yeah.
But the idea was, hey, let's build a space that's inspiring and encouraging to them. Let's give these kids the opportunity that we want for all of our kids. And so the kids love it. Not only are they learning, but they've got lots of enrichment activities. We do lots of fun things around the holidays. We have summer camps, So it's more than just, babysitting. It's more than just an after-school program. It's a very rigorous academic setting, but it's a fun, safe, encouraging, inspiring place for them to be, which is different than a lot of the environments that they get exposed to at school, for sure.
Why? Yeah, I bet it is. I'm curious. Again, I'm sure it varies from kid to kid, but why so many kids that are a couple years behind in reading? Is it like?
Yeah, that's a good
a
question.
Certain kind of a kid, or is it their environment, or what's the?
I think it's the environment and the adults.
Yeah,
that's usually my answer for most of the problems with kids these days in the different environments that I've experienced with them. One, some of these kids just haven't been given the same opportunity that most of our kids get.
Right.
The schools are less than stellar. They're understaffed. For instance, we have a fully stocked library at our place. A lot of the schools around us don't have libraries or don't have librarians. So, they're just never given an opportunity to be around books and read and gain that love for reading. So that's one of the problems. It's just opportunity.
Right.
I think the second problem is the adults in their lives often aren't acting like adults. And so some of their teachers, we get calls, everyone, teachers bullying a kid or not, doing right by a kid and those kinds of things. Some of their parents and caretakers grown up in really rough situations, just trying to make ends meet, and so it's hard for them to, give their kids some of the opportunities that they would want or need. And so it's just this collection of, circumstances, environments, adults in their lives that have just kind of set them back. And our whole belief is that, hey, these kids are awesome kids. They're great kids. They just need opportunity like everybody else. They need a vision for success. They need to see an adult that looks like them, that comes from where they come from, that, oh, okay, I didn't know I could be that or do that. I didn't know that dream was possible.
Right.
And so that's really our job.
And you find that it works.
It works. It definitely works. Like I said, we've been around for over 25 years now, certainly made tweaks along the way. So not only is it a literacy program, it's also a math program, it's a homework program.
Right.
We've got a community garden where they're learning how to, grow fresh fruits and vegetables and eat healthy food.
They might need that skill someday.
All those kinds of things. So
right now.
Yeah, so we're really trying to, reach the whole kid. We've really expanded our services to the community. they spend 3 hours with us a day, 3 to 6 p.m. roughly, but they live in the neighborhood. So how do we make those places healthier places to live? So we really started to become more of like a community center on top of an after-school program.
Yeah. But you need that though, right? You need you need all of it. Otherwise,
You got to address everything, right? So a lot of our stuff is character-based. Like, hey, let's teach kids the right way to live.
yeah.
So, the academic piece is certainly one piece of it and a huge piece of it, and literacy probably the main piece of it.
Right.
But what do we do with those skills now that we've gained them?
Right. Yeah, the right way to. All right, so I'm glad you got to this right way to live thing because the thing that the whole catalyst for this episode was that and I mentioned this earlier, but something that comes up a lot on a show is, and we've had guests from different, kind of all walks of life. And we've had people that had a few guests that are not from the United States originally and we have had others that have done a lot of traveling. And there's this common theme among others, but there's one particular common theme that, we, in spite of all the warts and bumps and whatever, life in America is really good compared to a lot of other places, and Americans don't often appreciate that, and that's why people come here from other countries, because of the opportunity that's here. And we've had people that have told their story about, why they came here and what and how things were better, and so we're kind of proud of that, right? Like,
Sure.
yeah, America,
Sure.
better here, right, than other places. And then a few weeks ago, I happened on this article. Trev, you got that Wall Street Journal article? This headline caught my eye. One father's desperate plan to rescue his son from America. And I thought, well, that sounds like the opposite of everything we've been talking about on this show. Like what is going on? And so this is actually, it's a tough read, this article, actually, because it's really about this kid and his story, and it's not a happy ending.
Yeah.
If you go down a little bit, unfortunately, there's not any fancy charts or graphs. Can you blow it up a little bit there, Trev? Make it a little bigger. So, or zoom in a little bit there. Yeah.
Again, you're old and you can't see, right?
Yeah, that's the problem.
That's where we
are. Yeah. Got it. I see how this is going. All right. We'll go back up right there. Like Mr. Salaban, thousands of these parents have moved back to Somalia, bringing wayward children with them. Others send their. So this is a story about families who come from Somalia, which, if you're not familiar, is not a happy place to live. It's tough. It's oppressive. A lot of poverty. Government's pretty harsh. It's not a happy place.
Yeah.
Nothing against people from Somalia, but that's why people leave there and they come here.
Okay.
And this is just one example. Oddly enough, a lot of people from Somalia end up in Michigan. I don't know, like most of them end up in Michigan. Okay. And then if you read through this article, what you find is they end up moving back to once they're kids. So they come here, they come to America, to have a better life like everybody else. Yeah. And they've got their kids, their family, and then their little kids grow to be teenagers, and somehow they get caught up in what we call here youth culture, and it's so bad for them that the parents go back to Somalia and face the hardships there, just to try to get their kids out of. And somewhere in here it references that they deal with. I think we're okay. So yeah, that's where he was living. The kid was living. That's in the U.S. So, but wait, go back up, Trev. So he hounded his son to come up with a plan for his life. Now, there's some stuff in this article where I think the father was not probably doing he was doing what he knew how from his traditional upbringing. Yeah. But his problem was that the kid was like, no ambition, smoking dope all day, playing video games all night.
American teenager.
Yeah. Okay. So American teenager, and And so I got to think. So this really struck me, and this is just one story, and it's about Somalia. But apparently, so I did a little research, and apparently, there's some amount of people that come here, and then when their kids become teenagers, they leave. And so, is are these just odd examples that the press is finding, or like what's up with our youth culture? Is it that? And you just said
Yeah.
the typical American teenager.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, I think
Is that really what we've produced at this point?
I think both things can be true. I think we could say that America, on the whole, provides a better opportunity to succeed and chase your dreams than a lot of other places in the world.
Right.
Right. There are some very extremely impoverished nations. You know, before I had this job, I worked another job. We had schools and orphanages in like Malawi and Haiti and Colombia, like some rough places.
Right.
And so, you know, you take people over there and you think, okay, well, this is different. This is not the bubble of the United States that I'm used to. And
Right.
so I should be grateful for the opportunity that exists for me in the United States. At the same time, I think we can also say, hey, there is a youth culture in the United States, and in, you know, maybe it's different in different parts of the country, that have become unhealthy and that aren't the best environments for our kids to grow up in. And there's probably lots of reasons for that. Maybe we can get into some of them. But you know, I think both of those things can be true. I think, hey, America can be a great place to raise a kid and grow a family and chase down all your dreams, compared to a lot of other countries around the world that we've been to. And at the same time, admit that, man, it's not all great. And in fact, some parts of it are probably pretty dangerous and not very healthy for our kids.
So so let's get into that.
Sure.
And if we leave out the extremes, right?
Yeah.
Let's leave out, you know, the really rough places where kids get into gangs. That's bad.
Yeah.
But that's probably not a large portion of the American teen population. Or maybe it is.
Okay.
And we'll leave out, you know, kind of on the other end, the just, for lack of a better word, like the good kids and the good families where they do everything right and everything's happy. And, you know, there's a couple of those out there, right?
Okay.
But in the middle, apparently you got a whole bunch of this, you got this youth culture that you said maybe a lot of it is not healthy.
I just think,
what does it look like?
I think it's just a more tenuous place to be as a teenager in America. I mean, we're joking about our age, but, you know, when we grew up as teenagers, we didn't have a lot of the things to deal with, from my perspective, that teenagers today deal with. Like, I got teenagers in my house.
Right.
The social media, for example. Like, if we'd have had social media when I was a kid, I would have been in trouble, man. Like, I don't want everybody knowing my stories and all the crap that I was getting into. And
I see what you're saying. Yeah. Not necessarily because like you couldn't get your eyes off of it, but because
both. Like, so let's say, hey, just the exposure, right?
Right.
The media culture that exists. That, hey, if something goes wrong or something goes sideways, like, everybody knows, especially as an athlete, right? That would have been bad.
Yeah.
But I don't know what it contributes to the mental health, the emotional health of our kids. Like, in our house, for example, we don't give our kids phones until they're 13 years old, which is actually really late compared to a lot of our friends and neighbors. And sometimes our kids get ribbed about, you don't have a phone, you're in whatever grade.
Right.
But it's an immediate recognizable difference in the disposition of a kid when I give them their phone at 13, just 6 months later or a year later.
Yeah.
Like, the things that they're engaged in, the things that they're exposed to, it's just different.
Yeah.
And it's difficult. And so I think, you know, again, it's a lot of opportunity. They have access to a lot of technology that, you know, didn't exist when we were kids. Like, there was no internet, there was no email, there was no cell phones, none of that stuff. And now our kids have all of this.
Right.
And so I think that has contributed to some things that we'd probably like to take back if we could, but we can't.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's been a lot of research done on this recently about this on the social media thing, and I'm trying to remember the guy. There's one guy that's a leading researcher. Trev, it's like Lindbergh or what is that guy's name? He does a lot of research on like teenage anxiety and depression.
Yes.
And it's not Lindbergh. It's Len. I can't remember. Anyway, one of the things that he said is the evidence is inconclusive about whether the social media itself does harm. There's some indication that Instagram tends to make girls feel bad, and there's some other things. But for the most part, what he said his major concern was what is it displacing?
Yeah.
So his example was,
Sure.
if your 5 hours a day on your phone is displacing TV watching time, not worried about it. Neither one of those is good for you, but you're not any worse off.
Yeah.
Having but if it's displacing like
Human
healthy
interaction.
social interaction,
Go outside and play, all those kinds of things.
then it's a problem.
Yeah, I don't know what it says scientifically. I can just tell you from dealing with kids and having kids in my own house, the evidence is pretty clear to me.
You just see it. Like you don't need the scientific research.
I don't need a research study done on that. I can see it in my own kids. I can see it in the kids that we lead every day. It puts pressures and creates environments that I think are difficult for a young person to handle. And so I know we didn't arrange all this to talk about, media and phones and all that kind of thing. But I think it's one factor. And so I think kids that grow up with that, like our kids now, they don't know any different. That is their life. They are a technology-based culture. And there are a lot of good things that come with that. But if the parents aren't equipped to help them handle that, then that's difficult, right? And you just hand a kid a phone and say, go figure the world out.
So you got a bunch of kids, you said 1st through 6th grade, right?
Yeah,
120 kids from not great environments all the time.
Correct.
They all got phones?
Most of them. We collect a lot of phones when they come in the building every day.
Yeah.
We don't let them take them to the classrooms and those kinds of things. But, young kids, 1st, 2nd graders, it's not uncommon for them to have a phone. So I think that's one part of the issue. Again, I don't want to belabor that point too much.
Right.
But I think what you're talking about and where parents can feel like, man, this whole environment and culture that my teenager is growing up in is unhealthy and perhaps unsafe for them is primarily school related.
Yeah.
The environment and the culture that exists on a lot of campuses, even healthy, well-resourced, well-graded campuses and school districts, even within those schools, there's just an attitude, a freedom, a conversation that's happening within teenagers that when you first have teenagers in your own house is a little bit mind-blowing.
Yeah. Like what? Like explain that a little bit more.
Just the things that they're exposed to, the things that they talk about, whether, just from a language standpoint, a sexuality standpoint, exposures to substances, acceptance of these things. Like, it's just, they take for granted, and it's almost commonplace, this level of unhealthiness, and in some cases, I would say dangerous behavior and attitudes. That's just like, hey, that's just who we are. We're teenagers, man, don't you? It's just what happens. This is what we talk about. This is what we do. This is what we see. This is what we expect.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So you're describing things that I think, like when you and I were teenagers, when first I was a teenager and much later you were a teenager, it's not that we didn't know about all those things or people weren't doing those things, but there was a general stigma that, like, that was bad stuff, right?
Yeah.
It was
Yeah, and maybe maybe we're giving ourselves too much credit. Maybe we were doing a lot of stupid things when
Well,
we
it's
were
not that we
young.
didn't do it, but it was.
Yeah,
I guess what I'm trying to say is there wasn't so much this notion of it's just accepted and this is just how teenage.
and not
Like,
only accepted, but sometimes unacceptable not to be on the other side of the fence. Meaning, like, hey, you're not cool, and you're not in our little circle here if you don't engage in these activities, or if you're afraid to talk about these things, or watch this on your cell phone, or do this in the back of the school bus. I
yeah.
mean, it's wild.
I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, we had the same dynamics were happening back then. It's just there wasn't as much exposure to so many things.
Well, yeah, and so now somebody can do something stupid at school, and then it gets texted on a video to all their friends, and then posted on a Facebook page, and then all the things, right?
Right.
It's a different world.
So the schools. But we got onto the school thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a lot of debate. Not debate. Debate is a very nice word for it. There's a lot of arguing and fighting.
Yeah.
Even here in Houston,
Yep.
our HISD just got commandeered by the state, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And I didn't even know. I haven't had kids in school for a long time, so I don't always keep up with the news in the schools, right?
Yeah.
And I saw that when I was like, holy cow! Like I didn't realize it had gotten. Presumably, it got that bad.
Yeah.
But where is it that what you see? Because I guess I'm following a certain line of thinking here, which
Okay.
is that there's this youth culture that's not healthy, and in some cases it's so bad that it makes people go back to scary places. But in any case, you can see it's not healthy. There's and a lot of you got teen depression going up. There's an article, or did you have something on that, Trev? New York Times article. There was one that was called "Why Are American Teens So Sad?" Major swings in teenage well-being. Teen mental health has deteriorated, especially for girls in the last 15 years.
Yep.
Suicide rates are rising again. Feelings of loneliness and sadness.
Yep.
The amount of time they spend socializing in person is down, not as much sleep. Young people are telling us that they're in crisis. This is not, you can spend about 8 seconds searching the internet and find like 27 articles that all kind of read like this.
Yeah.
So there's kind of an unhealthy thing there happening. And you figure that whatever's the underpinnings of that must be starting earlier in life. And you're working with kids in schools, and where is the school? Where are the schools coming up short?
Yeah. That's a good question.
And I know you got relationship with people in schools, so I'm not asking you trash talk schools or whatever. But
I think we've talked about this. My father's an educator, has been for 40 plus years, still is. So I grew up in all of that.
yeah,
I think there's a couple distinctions we need to make. One, not all teenagers in all schools are bad, right? Sometimes we can get on the extremes of these conversations and just
that's what I mean. Yeah,
paint everybody with a broad brush. There's some amazing teenagers, some inspiring people doing amazing stuff, using technology and using all the opportunities that they have.
But we're talking about this cultural thing that seems to be not healthy for people, for kids, right?
The other distinction I would make is that it's not, in a lot of cases, geographic specific or even economic specific, meaning the rich white suburbs often have as many problems in their schools as the underserved minority schools that we deal with on a consistent basis. So I don't want to paint it racially or socially or financially even, although there are some factors, depending on what place you're in, contributing to that. I think what I'm trying to say is that in our school systems today, compared to maybe when we grew up, it's easier to fall through the cracks. It's easier to fall into the wrong crowd. It's easier to get overlooked. It's easier to get into trouble that could be real trouble. And not just, oh, you got to go to detention because you sent a bad note to somebody. It's like, wow, somebody brought a gun to school today, and now we're having real problems.
Right.
So, when I get back to the whole, what are the schools doing or not doing that's contributing to these issues? To me, again, it's always going to come back to the adults. And again, this is where I think you got to make a couple of distinctions. Not all teachers are bad, right? Not all teacher administrators are bad. Not all schools are bad. There are some really good ones that are doing amazing things. And again, my father's dedicated his whole life to inspiring kids. But I also don't think it's unfair to say that a lot of our schools are not being led by our best leaders. And that's where some of our best leaders are needed. I mean, the development and the encouragement and the growth of our next generation of leaders is in the hands of the adults that are in a lot of these buildings. And a lot of times, it's those adults that are failing those kids, in my opinion.
Right. Is it, so being a good leader is a whole big topic, but is it, do you think it's, so if we were going to, let me turn this around and make it a little bit more positive. If we were going to make it better in schools, what would we change?
That's easier said than done, right? It's one thing to complain about the problem. How do you fix it? So, one of the things, we exist because we're trying to fix the problem, but we're not changing the schools necessarily, right? We're just trying to correct the problem that's coming out. So there's been other people that say we're going to start our own.
The most efficient way to do it.
Other people say we're going to start our own school, or charter schools. A lot of them get started that way because they're like, hey, well, I'm just going to build a better school or a better system. But I don't think that is necessarily sustainable across the spectrum, right? You can't just tear every school down and start new ones.
No, but so you mentioned leadership. Like, what are the qualities that school leadership ought to have?
Well, I think we all know what that is. I think that it's fairly common sense, right? People that are good leaders are compassionate. They're inspiring. They're encouraging. There's a lot of research.
They have the right priorities, the right motivations.
They're there for the right reasons. Things that we would expect in whatever industry. I mean, whoever you work with at your company, and whoever I hire at our place, like, we're looking for character. We're looking for competency. We're looking for chemistry, with all the basic things that you look for in a leader. I think the problem is, on one level, pretty basic, meaning, wow, these guys don't get paid very much. So why would our best leaders in any industry want to go make $58,000 a year when they can make $158,000 a year down the street?
Right.
The answer is, well, because we love it, and it's in our blood, and we want to help the next generation of kids. I just think that's a pretty rare mindset, and an increasingly so. Teachers, I think, used to garner a level of respect.
Do we need to move this table?
No, man, you're good.
You're like 6'6".
That's good.
I got you sitting coach.
I just think we make it really hard to take our best people and say, hey, go invest in these kids.
Well, that is a tough one, right? I don't know what the answer is to that, but even so that's a problem that we're not going to fix here today. But if we're just kind of trying to understand the situation, you got that. You also so something that I saw as I was in some of the things that I read that were in my notes that I lost before this episode is there's this even leaving out kids that are falling through the cracks and getting in real trouble. What sort of permeates the youth culture is, in a lot of cases, and like you said, there's exceptions, there's people who are different, but lack of, as they get to be 16, 17 years old, 18 years old.
Yeah.
Lack of ambition,
Yeah.
lack of what are you going to do with your life?
Yeah, that's a weird thing I don't understand. I'm still having a hard time as a
Yeah.
parent wrapping my head around that. Like, I felt like I grew up in a neighborhood and a place that even, I mean, it wasn't well off. We weren't broke by any means, but, you know, pretty middle income, you know, pretty basic Houston suburb, if you will.
Right.
But like, I felt like everybody around me wanted to be somebody and do something and had, you know, big dreams about like, hey, I want to grow up and be this or chase, you know, a lot of it was built around athletics for me because that's the environment I was in. But even then, like everybody had goals and ideas of where they wanted to go. But now, you know, you do run into a lot of kids that just don't have it. Like what do you want to be when you grow up? I don't know. Like,
yeah, like they don't. And you're talking about now. You ask a 13-year-old boy, what do you want to be when you grow up, and whatever he says, you can figure that's not going to be it, right?
Yeah.
With the exception of those ones that really have a really like a hook on something. But most of the time, you're going to change your mind 50 times. But by the time you get to be like, I remember like when we were, you know, we're seniors in high school and people are talking about where they're going to go to college and what they're going to major in. And of course, everybody changed their major 3 times after they went to school. But the point is, like, you were thinking about it.
Yeah.
You were still stupid and you didn't really know how the world works. But, like, you were thinking about that. And now, from what it seems like, and I don't have teenagers in my house anymore, but some of the things that I was reading, it sounds like this guy in the article that we looked at first, that moved back to Somalia, like the boy was basically just like all he wanted to do was smoke pot and play video games all night long. Yeah, and that was it. He had some ambitions about being like a fashion designer and some other stuff, and that drove his father crazy because his father was
that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
I'm always coming back. I give kids the benefit of the doubt. I do think in so many instances they're products of the environments and the adults around them, and so I think there's a certain level of, you know, standard and expectation that I have as a parent that I'm not willing to let go of. But at the same time, what I've learned as my kids have gotten older is that I have to broaden my view of what success might look like for them. And
that's a good point.
You know, you talk about, he wants to be a fashion designer. Well, what's wrong with that, right?
Nothing.
Whereas before, you know, 50 years ago, you're not going to be a fashion. You're going to go to school and become a lawyer or a doctor or a teacher, you know, all the things, the respected, you know. But like my kids will tell me now, I can learn more on YouTube than I can going to this class or going to, and in some cases that's actually true.
Yeah.
Like I give them a lot of crap because they watch a lot of mindless stuff on YouTube for sure. But one of my kids like built an entire computer just from watching YouTube videos. Like literally built, like for Christmas, what do you want? I want these computer parts. They're like, well, let's just go to Best Buy and buy a computer that'll actually work. And when it breaks down, then we can take it back and get it fixed. No. I want to build my own. And it's probably the best computer we have in our house.
Yeah, right.
Right? And he did that all over YouTube, right? So, you know, I could be the old crotchety, you know, get off my lawn guy and say, well, we're not going to watch YouTube and build computers. But so again, I think some of it is just the adult, you know, understanding.
You make a good point,
means.
Which is kind of what you're getting at, and the fact that you keep coming back to this adults in their life thing, whether it be teachers or parents, but it really starts with parents.
Yeah.
And you know, whatever kids are, you can blame, like we can say, well, it's the social medias and it's this, that thing, and whatever, right? And it's the school and the, but like home is home. Like that's where they start out. Yeah. And that's where, in fact, there was this interesting thing. Hey, Trev, look up, there's a chart. You should be able to find it if you just look for teenagers, drugs, and family meals. And we'll look at this chart. So this is Now, let's see. Look at the pictures. Here we go. Is that one over there on the far right? No, it was on the far right. That one right there. Okay. Yeah, get that up. Pull that up. That picture. Okay. This was a study that was done. What's it say at the bottom there? National Center on Addiction and Substance Abuse at Columbia University, 2011. Okay, so this is 13 years ago, but it's still relevant. So what you see is the orange bars is kids who say they eat family dinner between 0 and 2 times per week, and the blue bars is kids who eat family dinners, most all the week.
Yeah.
And dramatic difference in terms of, substance usage. Now, what's kind of funny is the even the kids who say, like, they're all ratting out their friends more than they're admitting it.
Yeah, of course.
Both the orange and the blue, right? They're both like, do you use alcohol? Do you use marijuana? Yeah,
not,
maybe.
but
my friends do.
Yeah.
But consistently across the board, and this was a whole study, and it's a funny thing to think because all they looked at was they didn't look at anything else about the home environment except
just dinner.
Do you eat family dinner? How many times a week? And that has an impact on these things.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason some of that's true is because that's probably a small indicator of an overall engagement
right.
from a mom or a dad or whoever the caretaker is with their kids. So if they're going to be intentional about having family dinners as many nights a week as we can, then they're probably intentional about a lot of other
things are there too, right?
Yeah, so I think that study's probably true, and again, sometimes difficult to pull off for different reasons. Like, some of the kids we're dealing with at YDC, well, my parents are working and they're not home. And so we're not eating dinner together.
But to your point, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. Or you move out somewhere else and, hey, we're not together because we're at soccer practice this night and basketball games this night and football practice. And so they're dispersed in a different way. But the problem that it creates is eerily similar, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a few different causes, but they contribute to the same problem. A kid's not being engaged. A kid doesn't feel part of a family. A kid's not invested in and encouraged and inspired and having the conversations that nobody's leading by example. We're just either overscheduling them and doing all kinds of stuff, or we're just not home, right? But both are
interesting. So yeah, because the people on the other end of the spectrum, you would probably think that I'm doing all the right things, right?
Exactly.
I've got them in. I'm involved. Like we're in the car every night going to. And I heard somebody talking about this recently, where they were like, almost like there's like the mom and the daughter and the dad and whatever, but the mom and the daughter, for like, she's a senior in high school, and since she was in junior high, almost all of her meals were eaten out of the cooler in the car.
There you go.
Because they're on their way to
from one place to another.
And so what you're saying is that actually can have
just as dangerous as maybe not being there at all.
Yeah.
Sometimes, right? I mean, it's a little bit of an extreme statement to make, but I think we can see some of the principles at play here, right? If the mom or the dad or the caretaker, whoever it is not intentionally engaged with their kids.
On the right things.
Right. Consistently. Consistency is the huge part.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
It's really hard to be a consistent, sometimes I feel like I'm beating up on parents, but I'm beating up on myself. Like, being a consistent parent with all the factors that are swirling around our kids is sometimes very difficult, right? Like to try to beat back all of the forces of social media and the internet and all the technologies that they have.
Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart.
That takes real work for a parent.
Yeah. To
really monitor that consistently, to address that consistently, all of that. Same thing, you want to go on a positive side. Hey, here's Johnny's in football and basketball. He's got all these opportunities. Well, yeah, he could be doing all of those things. But try telling the kid, like I've had to do, hey, I don't think this football season is good for you. because you just came off a basketball season and your body probably needs a little break, and you're 10 years old. This is not a professional sport, right? I know all the coaches around, again, going back to the adults, all the coaches around you want you to play. Well, they want you to play because you're big, and they think if you play, then their team's going to win.
Right.
Right. But I don't know how much they're concerned about, is this actually good for you and healthy for you? And I know they don't know the whole pulse and the rhythm of what's happening in our home. And so, hey, Johnny, whoever maybe you got to sit out this season because it's good for you. And also, by the way, you got a brother that probably needs to play. And so because we don't want to drive around 58 places, we're going to sit out this season.
Right.
That takes a little courage from a parent.
Well, and I think in a lot of cases, some parents, they first have to wake up to that fact themselves, right? Because you got parents who are, I mean, this is something else that is very different now from when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, we played sports and we did things, but it wasn't every day, and it wasn't all day and all night, and it wasn't all year. It was, it was just kind of mixed into everything else you did, but it wasn't like this obsessive drive.
It's an obsessive drive for a lot of adults.
And is it the old thing about I didn't get to do, I wasn't.
Yes, there's some of it.
Yeah.
Parents living vicariously through their kids. Hey, like I could say, I didn't make it to the NBA, but I could train you how to become an NBA.
I'll be on your ass until you're until you graduate.
Right. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. So there is some of that. I think money, again, going back to money, there's so much money in youth sports.
So it's a big business.
Huge business, right?
I'll see.
So there's lots of leagues that, I'll give you an example. One of our sons plays soccer. He's in 5th grade. Good soccer player, but he's in 5th grade.
Right.
Thanksgiving Day, their team and their league tried to schedule a tournament over the break.
On Thanksgiving Day.
And they wanted us to play, I think it was 2 games, on actual Thanksgiving Day. And my wife looked at me and was like, what are they thinking?
Yeah.
And I think it's very easy what they're thinking. They're trying to make money. If we schedule a tournament over the holiday break, they get paid, right? If 100 teams give their $300 entry fee for that tournament, do the math, right? They're making that money over that week. And if they don't play that weekend, then they don't get paid.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of money involved in that. The third thing, the financial piece of it kind of graduating from that is now, as we see some of the extreme examples, there are high school athletes and now college athletes making millions and millions of dollars, right? And so their parents...
High school athletes?
Oh, yeah. They're getting endorsements now.
Wow.
Right? It depends on what state you live in. Some of it's legal, some of it's not. But they can get endorsed, make money, sign contracts, and make more money than their parents ever dreamed of.
Yeah.
And so where it used to be, hey, everybody's chasing the NBA dream.
Yeah.
Well, now you just speed up that timeline. Well, hey, 17 years old, sign $1 million endorsement deal. And
so you know what the common theme is? All the stuff that you're saying, which comes back to what you said in the beginning, which is about the adults.
Yeah.
That are in kids' lives, and it's parents, it's school teachers, school administration, it's coaches. It's organizers of things. If all those people were really thinking about how do we produce a next generation of really solid kids that have direction and are well-grounded, and basically to produce a society that we want, right? You come back to this whole notion of the American dream as it was originally described wasn't about, in fact, there's a famous quote in the book where he even says, it's not a dream of motor cars and high wages only, it's a dream of a society that has certain qualities.
Yeah.
And if we were all trying to produce that, then that would be our priority with the younger generation, right? But all those examples that you gave just tell me that the priority is on all kinds of other things, right?
Sure. And again, not in all cases, but in a lot of cases
the motivation. The motivation is something different.
Yeah, like go to a youth we probably have a kid in a youth basketball tournament twice a month. Go to one of those tournaments and watch how crazy some of the coaches are yelling at the kids, cursing at the kids, making a fool of themselves. The parents in the stands. I mean, you wouldn't have to be there more than an hour to find,
Yeah.
wow, I wouldn't want my kid to be on that team or in that, like, what's happening here, right? Or go to some of these schools, where either, a teacher's checked out and just trying to get a paycheck and playing, computer chess on his laptop all day while the kids just sit there.
Wow.
Or, they're bullying kids and dragging them across the cafeteria by their car, doing stupid stuff.
Wow.
So, like, it's real.
The teachers are doing the bullying.
Yeah. I mean, all that stuff is real and it's out there. And so, it's just too much of it. And in some concentrated pockets, it just creates, maybe like that guy, it's like, hey, I don't want to live here anymore.
I think
maybe.
I think, and when you think about all this, it seems like when we look at our youth culture, and I mentioned this when I think it was before we started, we were just chatting, and I said, as I was thinking about this whole idea for this episode, I thought, youth culture is a relatively new phenomenon in terms of social history. It really started, and as much as I love Elvis and the Beatles, right?
Yeah.
It started in the 50s. The 50s was the first time in the United States that teenagers were actually kind of came into something that had power.
Yeah.
Right. Had consumer influence. Became a market.
Yeah.
And also kind of had this, like that thing you said before, but we're teenagers, so that's right. Like if you really think about it, if you go back before that time, throughout history, you were a kid.
Yeah.
And then at some point you became an adult.
Okay.
Now, depending on what culture you were in and what period, that could have been 13 years old or 18 years old or whatever, right? But basically you were a kid, and then at the point that you're an adult now, the expectations were that you had the responsibility and the accountability, and you lived a grown-up life. And so somewhere around the 50s in this country, and certainly developing in the 60s and 70s, we kind of had this new thing, this youth culture that has its own set of expectations and priorities and rules and parameters and things like that, right?
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, 50, 60 years later, whatever it is, 70 years later, we have a problem with it. We don't all of a sudden have a problem with it. It's been a problem. Yeah. But based on all the things some of the things that you're saying, it sounds like we shouldn't be all that surprised, right? Like it's sort of like you've been neglecting this thing or doing things a certain way, and then all of a sudden one day you go, well, how come it's like this?
Yeah. I tell, again, I feel like sometimes I'm bashing on other adults and other parents, and I do a really sucky job, I'm sure, a lot of times.
Yeah. Your kids have told me all about
it. If they were here, they could tell you lots of stories, I'm sure. But I think in some ways we're asking them to grow up too fast. Mm-hmm. So we're giving them technology, we're giving them access, we're giving them freedoms that maybe they're not equipped to handle at the ages that they're possessing them. And then at the same time, there is this attitude, you call it youth culture, as I tell my kids all the time, you want all the freedoms without the responsibility.
Right.
Right, like, you're not paying any bills as far as why do you get to check my phone? Because it's actually my phone. If you want to buy your own phone and get on your own plan, I'll never look at it.
Right.
But until that day,
it's my phone.
I'll look at my phone whenever I want to look. I'm just letting you borrow it.
Yeah. How does that go over?
Yeah, exactly. But that's the reality of where we live. Like these kids, and again, in some aspects, it's really positive. They're maybe smarter than we have ever been. They think about things more creatively than we've ever thought. And some of them are creating things and doing things that we would have never fathomed of doing.
Sure.
When we were growing up. But the flip side of that is, the dangerous side of that is, oh wow, now they have access and all of these things, but what productively are we using it for? And if in the really wrong hands, the real dangers it can create.
And then, you know, on net balance, what is the impact to society? You know, because another one of the things that's kind of baked into the concept of the American dream, historically, is that each generation wanted their kids, the next generation, to do better than they did.
Yes.
Right. That was, you know, you're always working for your kids to do better. And I think parents still have that objective in a lot of cases, or maybe they don't think of it that way exactly, but there's some reason why they're putting their kids in all these things, and you know, and we didn't even get to like the college pressure, right? And all that, and but if we're not having the desired, like, and there's some amount of every generation worries about the next one lacking something in some way.
I just think the extremities are more dangerous.
Yeah.
Again, to go back to that thing, maybe that's where in this whole kind of line of thinking is that the kind of trouble that my kids can get into today, literally today, it could happen at school today, is in some cases so extreme.
Right.
Even in my protective suburban bubble, right? A death threat, a gun at school, like a school shooting was unheard of.
Yeah, no.
Now it's every week.
Yeah.
A mass shooting. Like we're doing mass shooting trainings at our school. We did it at Youth Development Center.
Right.
It's just part of, so it's like before, little Johnny brought something to school, but now it's like, hey, people die.
Right.
Or what's it, fentanyl. Now fentanyl's in some aspirin that somebody gave you, and you're dead.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, or you did this stupid thing and somebody took a video of it, and now it's gonna follow you forever. So like the extremities,
right? And maybe it was technically illegal, and now your life is really ruined.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Go to jail for it.
Yeah.
Or your parents go to jail for it.
Yeah.
You know, so this extremities of the danger, I think it's a lot tougher to be a teenager today than when I grew up. Infinitely.
Yeah.
Infinitely so.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it seems to be, I mean, it just seems to be a continuum that has been gradually getting worse and worse, right? It's not, and it's interesting because there are some statistics that show that in some ways teen behavior by certain measures has gotten better in recent years in terms of like there's not as much drinking and driving, there's not as much, I can't remember, there's a few things where like statistically like they're not doing certain things as much as they were, let's say, in the 80s or 90s, but overall they're more depressed.
Yeah.
They have less motivation.
Yeah.
They're more Trevor had an article on a minute ago. I don't know if we looked at it, but doomers. That's the new term, right? The doomers.
That's encouraging.
Doomerism. Doomerism isn't new. Technology has harmed mental health. I mean, you can debate all of these things. Yeah. But that's another thing that comes up, you know, is they're worried, they're hearing about how the environment is gonna like the earth is gonna be destroyed and all these things. Right? So so that they're worried about.
So maybe this is where you're leading, and if not, maybe this is where we'll go. I think you can get, and some of this conversations maybe felt a little bit like that. It's easy to kind of have a doom and gloom outlook on the culture today, right? I mean, you just, any segment of the population and the culture, you could talk yourself into some really bad scenarios, right?
Sure.
From COVID to weather change to politics to education to substance abuse to technology. Like, you could have a well-educated conversation about a lot of bad things that could continue to be like, oh, crap, we're headed in the wrong direction and we may not come back, which may be true. I don't know. But what I do know is that at least from where I sit, the only possible solution that we have is that the adults in the room who see these things actually do something about it.
Right.
So sometimes we get overwhelmed by these conversations and these ideas about where the world is heading. But I always tell people, hey, look, do for one person what you wish you could do for everyone. So I can't fix the school system, right? I can't fix the school system. But for 120 kids every day, I can make their lives better. I can surround them with people, and I will demand that our people in the building, the adults in the building, act like adults and inspire and encourage those kids so they do have a positive role model in their lives, so somebody they can look up to and say, all right, maybe my life can be different. Maybe my trajectory can be different. I coach a lot of our kids' youth sports teams. I'm intentional about telling them, hey, look, I want you to be a better athlete, but more importantly than that, I want you to be a better person. So there's going to be lessons that you're going to learn from this basketball season that are going to far outweigh whatever athlete you think you're going to become. And, you know, some of my kids, because I was a professional athlete, they think, you know, and some of them may have a chance. Who knows? I don't know. But what I do know is that I have a big sway, and every coach does, into what kind of kid that kid is going to become. I mean, everybody can think back to a teacher or a coach instantly, for better or for worse, made a great impact on your life, or really messed with your head that you still worry about today. Right? So I say to every parent or caretaker or coach or teacher, hey, just be the example that you want all the teachers to be, or that you want all the coaches to be. You're not going to be able to change everybody, but you can change one kid, and if we all did that,
then we're there.
Then maybe the world's a better place.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Yeah, that's probably good. We should wrap. That was a good speech. I like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll.
As I tell my wife, I give a lot of great speeches that nobody listens to.
Well, so you know what happens? That one will become a short that we publish separately, just a little 60 seconds.
There you go.
But I like what you said. Do for one person what you'd like to do for everybody, and some people like you can do it for 120 persons, and somebody maybe can only do it for their kids, and somebody else can maybe do it for their kids, and the kids next door who aren't getting the right attention, and somebody else can do it but that's really the only way that it happens. But it also means that all us grown-ups, like, we got to have right thinking, and we got to be on the right. Like, we got to know what being a good person looks like.
Yes, and we got to do it in a non-judgmental, non-self-righteous way. Like, some people would hear what we just said and be like,
now you're making it hard.
Yeah, but I also know that you aren't the best dude on planet Earth, and I bet if I talk to your kids, you made a lot of mistakes. Yes.
Right.
The answer is yes. But I'm not going to stop trying.
Yeah,
right. I'm gonna get to the end of this, and hopefully that my good days outweighed my bad days, and my good instruction outweighed my bad examples every once in a while. You know, like all of those things. Like, we can't look at the problem and just give up.
Yeah.
It's either, hey, let's just figure this out, and let's do the best we can, and let's help other people do it.
Yeah.
Without judging them, right? Which is a huge problem today, right? You get some.
Well, we're so busy.
You don't do it like me, or like I made a statement about giving a kid at 13, and there's somebody out there like, oh, well, that's why your kids suck. If you never give them the phone till they're 18, or you get others that'll be like, well, you're not teaching them how to deal with the real world. You should have gave them one when they were in first grade. All right, I'm just doing the best I can here with the information that I got, and.
Well, and it's what are we trying to produce? Like, you know, we're trying to. If we think about what a good society looks like, and then we look at the kids and we go, well, it's on us. We're on the hook to produce that future society.
That's right.
Right?
Right. So tear down the school system, let the political system become a mess, let the family structure become a mess, and then be surprised about the outcome of that. Right? Hey, as adults, we're all involved in some of these segments of the population, and we just got to do better.
Yeah. Good. All right, we got to do better. I'm gonna end it on that. Thank you, Jason. Jason, right?
That's it.
Skaer.
So long. You
We've been talking for so long. I forgot your name. Thanks again, and we'll hopefully, somebody will say, I need to do some of that.
Good.